So it's been a while since we did one of these videos. McDonald's, more than just a simple burger joint, a place that resonates with kids worldwide, and of course, the most popular hangout for obese diabetics worldwide. Now we all know and love this brand, and more importantly, its product. I'm sure everybody's got a memory of going to McDonald's and having a good time. But in my opinion, in recent years, McDonald's has really been underdriven in terms of new growth. Until now. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down McDonald's stock and giving my personal opinion on if McDonald's is actually worth buying at its current levels. So buckle up tight, grab your 2 McChicken nuggets, Ronald McDonald, you're about to get an STI. So it's no secret, when you're talking about restaurant chains and especially fast food, McDonald's really is the company to beat. This company literally transformed the whole food industry itself. But what we want to know is, as McDonald's is continuously making new all-time highs over the past few weeks, is there still room for growth, or has this company peaked? Now, as always with the STI series, we will start out with some fundamentals. But before we get into that, this is not financial advice. I'm just a guy with a beard on the internet talking about Big Macs. But if you do want to help me out, please do go and hit that like button. It massively helps this video out in terms of ranking on the YouTube platform. If you want to buy and sell McDonald's stock yourself or any other stock, you can sign up with eTORO on the pinned comment, sign up via that link, deposit, make a trade, and you get access to the LWT eTORO ECOFIN chat room. Now, McDonald's ticker symbol MCD. Now, at the recording of this video, McDonald's is riding about 2% away from its all-time high, which usually would indicate it's not a good buying opportunity in terms of value. But at the current stock price, that means McDonald's market cap is currently 174 billion. Definitely not a small company by any stretch of the imagination. But assuming this and many other indicators, simply Wall Street's algorithm actually thinks McDonald's is overvalued by 25%, which is quite a decent number, and if you're looking for a value investment, that should really scare you off. Simply Wall Street thinks a fair value would be around about $185 a share. Currently, at the recording of this video, it's around 223. So a decent dip there in terms of value if we just went on Simply Wall Street's crazy mathematical equation, which is something nobody should ever just go off, to be clear. They have a PE ratio of 33 and a PEG ratio of 3.9, which given the current market is definitely not bad at all. Now, some slight bad news looking at their assets and liabilities. Genuinely, this caught me off guard a little bit. If we look at their short-term assets, we can see that they have 5.47 billion in assets and a 4.58 billion in liabilities. So short-term, they're covered. But if we look at the long-term, this is what caught me off guard a little bit. Long-term, they have 46 billion in assets with a deficit, 53.7 billion in liabilities. Genuinely don't know how I feel about that. And the picture gets a little bit worse when we look at the debt to equity ratio. Their debt to equity ratio is 493%. Which is an absolute mess. And if you want me to put that into context, AMC stock, a stock that I think everybody would fundamentally agree is flawed and way overvalued, AMC's debt to equity ratio, bearing in mind they are debted to the eyelids, is coming in at 238, roughly half. Now, to be clear, I do not want to compare AMC to McDonald's in terms of revenues, cash flow, etc. But if you just went on debt to equity alone, AMC weirdly wins that one. Now, probably the most popular reason why people buy McDonald's is not really for the growth in the actual price, although over the long term, that seems to be what has happened. But they do pay you a solid dividend, and they are historically one of the best dividend payers on the stock market. Currently, they're paying you around about 2.2% at the current price, which in my opinion, given the current market, is not that bad at all. And they have also been increasing this dividend over the long term, and you can expect that to increase also. Now, the biggest thing we sort of look for in this sector is the insider volume. There's been really no buying or selling from insiders, which is a bit indifferent. It doesn't really give me any sell or buying indications. Now, just recapping the fundamentals there, to be honest, I was a little bit shocked about their debt to equity and their assets and liabilities. If you want to know if I'm buying or selling this stock, well, you're going to have to check out Patreon. Check it out in the description down below. You can see what I'm buying and selling with some of the perks in there. But to be clear, I do not think at the current price I could buy McDonald's, knowing that their debt to equity is high, knowing that their assets and liabilities are a little bit mismatchy. mismatchy. That's a bit of a weird word I never really say. But to be clear, I don't think McDonald's is going to face bankruptcy. I think it can easily afford to pay this. And if we look at the EBIT numbers, their cash flows actually outweigh this debt interest payments by 6-fold. So I think they are really covered there. And I don't think it's a AMC situation, but it does sort of throw me off a bit when I'm looking for a value investment that will grow long term and also pay me a dividend. So to be clear, I don't think McDonald's is for me right now. But there is some cool growth stories with McDonald's. McDonald's recently said that it's doubling down on the 3Ds. And no, Anthony, get off Pornhub, it's not that type of D. They're doubling down on deliveries, drive-thrus, and digital. Now let's look at these individually. Digital is basically when you go in or you go to a drive-thru and it's a touch menu. I think these are going to be much more popular in most restaurants. We've seen them become very popular in stores like Tesco, even in Walmart, where self-service is becoming more and more a thing. This is good for a company long-term because you have less staff, it's more efficient, and it's cheaper to maintain. I would not be surprised in the long term if you see McDonald's stores slowly shrink as they move into this aspect business model where they basically just have a kitchen and a window and you take your food away. After all, that was the whole business model with McDonald's initially, and as time goes on, people tend to want their food at home, they want it delivered, which is another one of the Ds, and they want it fast. McDonald's notoriously was famous for its fast food, and let's be honest, there is no such thing as fast food anymore because you still usually have to wait at least a few minutes. Another thing they're doubling down on is deliveries, and this has become very, very popular. I remember a couple of years ago when there was even rumors in the UK that McDonald's delivery might be a thing, and this is way before the whole Miley Cyrus, and then the Miley Cyrus came and deliveries became quite popular. Not just from McDonald's, but from chains literally around the world. Then you throw in apps like Deliveroo and Uber Eats, it's actually helped companies like McDonald's get their deliveries to individuals in their own home. I think it makes absolute perfect sense that McDonald's sort of focuses on deliveries, on digital, and on the drive-thru. Think about how much real estate the company could genuinely save if they went back to the car park model instead of having these huge restaurants which you've got to heat, you've got to keep air conditioned, and you've got to staff. I do think this is a good move from McDonald's, and let's see how it plays out in the future. Now, if you've ever seen the movie About a Boy with Hugh Grant, and yes, I watched a Hugh Grant movie once. But in this movie, there's a boy and his mother is vegan and she refuses to let him to go to McDonald's. Well, that could be a thing of the past. Vegans must hate McDonald's because they do serve that evil thing that is meat. But McDonald's has now teamed up with a company called Beyond Meat, and they're actually going to be making something called the McPlant, which, to be honest, to me, sounds absolutely disgusting. I do think there is a big movement going on right now with lab-based meat and cell meats, and also, plant-based foods in general. And I think this is a good move for McDonald's partnering up with a company specializing in this sector. Now, I do think this news is massively overblown though, because I don't think there's that many vegans that wouldn't go to McDonald's anyway, because they'd probably just go there and get a salad and an apple and I don't know what else vegans eat. I don't really know too many here in Budapest. And to be clear, if you are a vegan in Budapest, that doesn't mean if you see me on the street, let's become friends. Now on to my thoughts on why I think McDonald's is really not a buy. And I'm sorry to say it because I do love the brand. I think the company will grow long term and the stock price may actually go up as well. But I just think there's better opportunities in the stock market, even with companies that are undervalued and might even pay you an even bigger dividend with less debt to equity. For me, really, McDonald's has really under-delivered in the past, say 5, even 10 years in terms of new avenues of growth. They're really focused on building up the brand and having the best brand in the world. And let's face it, they do have one of the best brands in the world and probably the best brand in the food industry themselves. But why has McDonald's not invested into other avenues? Things like making their own plant-based meat, things like maybe even making their own soft drinks, making their own Coca-Cola. Well, I can't say Coca-Cola because that's owned by someone else, but making their own version of it. Why have they not gone and ventured into something else other than just one brand? And I can't really fathom it because we've seen it from literally every company buying up smaller drinks companies, buying up smaller food chains. Why have McDonald's not done this? Because they clearly have the cash flow. Now, the one thing they did do in recent years is they wanted to compete with Starbucks. The McCafe. In my opinion, the biggest disappointment to come out of the US since High School Musical. the McCafe is a massive letdown. And the reason I'm saying this is they wanted to clearly compete with your Costa Coffees and your Starbucks. But think about it, when I was working in finance, I used to meet clients in coffee shops, in Starbucks, in Costa Coffees, but I never once went to a McCafe. And I think it's very adamant why. McDonald's is a famous family place to go and take your kids, get them a Happy Meal and watch them throw a tantrum because they didn't get the toy they wanted. Now, if you're having a semi-serious business or you want to go and have a nice coffee and sort of switch off for a minute, that's not the place to do it. And I think McDonald's really should completely separate the McCafe and the McDonald's and not have them in the same restaurant. I don't know what it's like over in the US, but the McCafes over here in Europe tend to be in the same building, and it's just got a completely different vibe. You go in, on one side of the room, there's people buying Big Macs and kids crying and jumping around in the play area and coloring books. And on the other side, you've got some blokes trying to have a sensible business meeting in suits. And there's no real divider there, it's not a separate room, and I don't get how the business model was ever meant to work. They should completely separate it and start looking at the McCafe as a separate business if they want to genuinely compete with the big boys like Starbucks. In my opinion, if McDonald's wants to take its company to the next level, and I really think they could, they really need to venture into new areas of business, or at least separate the McCafe and the McDonald's. But if they did go and buy a company, for example, like Pizza Hut, or acquisitioned even a small company like Tattooed Chef, this would make sense to me. Why aren't they doing it? So McDonald's, if you are watching this, get your finger out your arse and go and do something with your business that isn't just the golden arches. But PS, I love you really, and send me a gold McDonald's card so I can get as many free Big Macs as I can get. So what are your thoughts? Should we bring back the STI series to the channel? What do you think about McDonald's? Is it good value? Are you in it? And if so, at what price? The code word for this video is clown shoes. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one. Take care. Peace.